Welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. Last week, the Vice President called for reforms on Nigeria's basic education system, stating, and we quote, "1/3 of the teaching staff in public schools lack the right qualifications, while private schools are not particularly doing better," end quote. He linked this anomaly to the poor delivery of basic education and added that there will be continuous professional development for teachers, while teachers' training at the NCE level would be revised. Joining us now to speak on this is education consultant and the head of primary school at Children's International School, Joy Issa. Joy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, that was a harsh but true, it sounds like, because the way you were shaking your head, I guess that's a true indictment from the Vice President.
Absolutely.
When you hear that, is that something you're happy is happening at that level? Or once again, is it one of those things where you're saying, no, people have got this wrong. This is not the case. We're doing much better than people think.
Unfortunately, it is the reality on ground. I mean, the private sector seems to be doing a little bit more than the public sector in terms of professional development and teacher training, but you find that there are too many disparities within systems, across systems. If you look at private schools in Lagos, for example, doing much better than private schools up north. So we look at the disparity and wonder, this is definitely having an impact on literacy levels. And if I will just tie teachers' proficiency to children's performance in assessments, you find that where a teacher is better educated, where a teacher is aware of the curriculum and can deliver it, of course the children will come out, knowing better and wanting to think and innovate and create. I mean, His Excellency, the Vice President, mentioned about the need to revise the curriculum and include technology, a general focus on STEM. But when you look at it, who's going to teach that curriculum? There are 18,000 schools, private schools in Lagos alone. Where are the teachers who are digitally competent enough to deliver this, laudable curriculum? So as much as I agree with, the need for professional development, we really need to drill down into teacher education as a whole. Go all the way back to NCE. I mean, why NCE? Would you think about it? Graduates, master's degree holders, PhD degree holders, and you want your children to be educated by someone who basically has an NCE qualification. You finish from secondary school and you go to NCE. What kind of aspirations, where you find limited high order thinking, creativity and things at that level. So individuals are investing millions of naira to train abroad and then to come back and try and fit into the system. Well, it doesn't quite work. Okay, I'll set up my own school. How many children can fit into the few private schools available? It's really, we need standardized professional development in Nigeria.
So you have outlined quite a problem here. So let's start by looking at the issue of curriculum, which you mentioned. Let's look at it from the point of view of what's been taught to our children, how that needs to be harmonized. Certain schools will tell you, we only operate a British curriculum, we only operate a Nigerian curriculum.
Yes.
What is the effect of that on that generation or generations of students coming out of this kind of disjointed system? And also the curriculum being taught at that NCE level, because that was revised, I think, back in 2013. What was the effect of that? Yes, 2013, 2014 academic year. What has been the effect of that, if any at all?
You raise quite a few questions and I'll break them up this way. When you revise curriculum or any product, you need to set assessments in place to measure the impact of the revision. So it's all well and good to say, okay, I mean, if you go to the NERDC website, you will see the updated curriculum, you will see the guidelines and all, but there are no assessment parameters. So what are the standardized measures to check that, okay, now that we're teaching technology and science from primary school, what are our students able to do? What do they now know? And what are they now able to do better than they used to do before? If we go further down to preschool or pre-primary, you won't find anything on the website. The National Ministry of Education, Nigerian Ministry of Education, has published a one-year curriculum, a one-year policy. However, it's not readily available. In fact, I have a story from a friend who went to Alausa over 2 days looking for this curriculum and was told, oh, there's one copy here, oh, there's some copy there, and she still didn't come out with a copy. So when you have limited access to documentation, who's monitoring? How are you sure this person who says they're delivering the British curriculum is really delivering the British curriculum? And that, speaking on the subject of curriculum, this melange is not working. You can't mix tried and proven systems with systems that are not tried and proven. So you have the British curriculum, published, reviewed consistently, the American, which is basically the Common Core, and then each state has their own variations. You have what is being, what some of us are becoming very taken by the Finnish education system, and everyone's going on about how, oh, the children don't have homework, you know, of course.
But without taking a look at actually what is the whole, what is the environment in which these children are growing up in?
In order to be a teacher in Finland, you go through 5 years of education, not a short NCE program. You are a qualified graduate. You have to, you know, you look at what is undergirding that curriculum and you know, of course the teachers will be outstanding. Of course they're being highly paid. Therefore, they can promote high order thinking. They can promote your 4 C's of communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. So looking at the basics of primary education, or basic education as we call it in Nigeria, we need to ask ourselves 4 questions. How literate are our children and their teachers? How numerate are they? Are they digitally competent and can they solve problems? When we get these 4 things right, then we can say, right, we're moving, our populace is becoming a better educated populace. I mean, I could go on about this, literacy levels, if I just hone in on that. The disparity between the south and the north of Nigeria is alarming. Literacy levels, UNESCO published this data, literacy levels in the south, Lagos is about close to 90, but in the south on average is about 78. In the northeast is 14% for women.
Wow.
You know, so...
We're going to go on a break, Joy. When we come back, we're going to go a bit deeper into actually the skills for the future and what we need for them.
Okay.
Well, welcome back to the morning show. We're still in studio with Joy Issa, who's an education consultant and also the head of primary at Children International School. So before we left, you brought up something actually critical in one of the things you said, which is problem solving, which globally has been identified as one of the skills for the future. When you look at our curriculum and the fact that they're so disjointed and children are going to be going, I mean, at the end of the day, they're going to be going into universities, into schools, and we need to prepare them at the primary level for that and pre-primary. How are we preparing them? How is that integrated into our numerous curriculums, and what are the dangers of having these multiple curriculums?
Unfortunately, people rarely realize that our curriculum still remains a knowledge-based curriculum, as opposed to curricula published by other countries that are skills-based. So we need to transition from a heavy focus on what you know and what you can regurgitate in examinations to what you can do. When the curriculum evolves into an ability to solve problems, for example, you have service learning incorporated into curricula across, especially in America. I remember a few years ago, we tried to pilot a service learning component of the curriculum. Didn't quite go anywhere. I guess we didn't know who was who. But the point is, you have opportunities for little children to make changes. You have opportunities for little children to learn skills. I remember Lee Kuan Yew, the leader of Singapore, who, in his book, a very interesting comment, he said, the culture of the society was changed when the curriculum was changed. A simple thing, like a litter brigade, if you will, was incorporated into the curriculum from preschool. And from that year, as the children progressed, they learned to pick up after themselves, they learned to be tidy, and over a 10-year period, they saw a change in the entire society because they made a simple change in the curriculum. So again, it goes back to implementation and follow through. Who is going to implement this curriculum? So the many teachers who claim to be teaching the British curriculum, which is actually called the English National Curriculum, when was the last time they went abroad for training? Were they taught in this system? How are you delivering something you haven't learned? You know, it's quite funny. You go to a doctor and you don't say, well, you know, I kind of watched a few videos on how to dispense paracetamol and this and that, and so therefore I am qualified to give you Lonat, and you know, and you would never do that.
That's exactly what it is.
You would never.
But to add to the 4 C's you mentioned earlier, this is my little personal crusade. I would like to have a 5th C of civic education. I don't want it incorporated in other subjects. It should be taught a stand-alone. Because Nigerians do not take pride in Nigeria today, and that we need to change that.
You're perfectly right. Unfortunately, the updated curriculum published by any RDC does not have history in primary schools. Still.
It's a scandal.
And I wonder, well, I see the point of moving towards technology, you know, development and science, but you cannot remove history. We already have problems with people like me who had to learn a different local language from the language my parents speak, because my dad's from one state, my mom's from another state, my husband's from a third state, so I'm kind of everywhere. So English is my first language. So most of my time I spent in the north, so I picked up Hausa. But what language, you know, will my children speak? I have to choose to teach them Hausa because that's the only one I speak. But I read it, you know, skeletally. I don't write it very well. You know, how deeply do I understand my local language so that I can communicate with my children in my local language, so I can so I can read it, write it, and, you know, really learn with it? I don't.
Problem.
It is.
It's a huge problem. And another thing I was about to say about the whole civic education and this history issue. Certain schools do teach history, other schools don't. This is a lack of uniformity. It's
So then when students get to the next level, they're not actually on the same level.
All these gaps now become apparent. I also want to talk about implementation, like you mentioned. Let's talk about money. The budget, another scandalous figure, is 7% dedicated to education, which falls way below the UN. Is it UNESCO? Is it 15%?
UNESCO.
Yeah. But even at that, is all that money even released, that 7%? Because if you go to the UBEC website, there's billions of naira. I think it's 86 billion naira in a fund sitting there for states to access if the state can match it. So state governors ignore it, and that money is just sitting there wasted. What can be done about this?
Well, again, we need to leverage on the private sector in this regard, because we do not have enough skilled practitioners in the public system that can make a difference. So you give me a huge pot of gold. What am I supposed to do with it? Where do I start first? What do I do next? Yes, we need to train the teachers. What do they need to learn? What don't they know? We undervalue assessments and data. A lot needs to be invested in data collection and collation so that we can know, you know, you do a medical exam, so you know where to, you know, apply your interventions.
Is it undervaluing or open hostility? Look at what happened in Kaduna State when Governor Al-Rufai tried to, you know, do these assessments. The backlash was horrendous.
Governor Rufai is one of the governors who has actually done quite a bit. And I'm using part of what he's done with the World Bank in part of my doctoral studies. And you see the interventions. Unfortunately, again, what is the impact? So it's okay, we say we want to train 10,000 teachers, 20,000 teachers, right? After training them, we need to have a systematic way of collecting data on their performances and measuring the impact. So having the money accessible is one thing, it's the follow-through. So unfortunately, we need to have systems in place, people in place that will plan long-term interventions. So the current government has fantastic ideas for interventions, but what's going to happen after they leave? We need to have 10, 20-year plans in place that will be followed through for there to be real systemic change. Otherwise, well, you know, Mrs. XYZ will go abroad, do some training, and think, you know what, I need to make a difference in this country, and she'll set up a school. How many children will fit into that school? Maybe our best case scenario, 2,000 children. How many children in this country? If you look at us, Nigeria, if you look at sub-Saharan Africa, again, UNESCO published this data, 21% of the population is in the school age, right? For primary and lower secondary. Of that 21%, 33% are not learning. And if you drill further down into that data of sub-Saharan Africa, so West Africa and the rest of us, 84% do not meet minimum proficiency levels for maths, meaning you can't analyze a maths problem and, you know, break it down if it's put with words. 88% do not meet minimum proficiency levels for reading, meaning they cannot read a sentence and decode what it means.
88%.
Yes.
Wow.
Of primary and lower
junior, secondary are not learning.
Of the continent.
Yes.
It's staggering.
It is. So we're way behind. So we really, before we go, we need to learn to crawl before we run. So I applaud His Excellency's, you know, comments on rejigging the curriculum and let's go to technology and STEM, but we have a fundamental problem.
People can't read.
We cannot read.
So what do you think about President Buhari saying, well, it's not really him because that's the law, but wanting to now enforce the law, criminalizing keeping your child out of school, a child under the age of 9. So should parents be jailed at this point? I
agree. Do something with the parents. However, remember that a child who is hungry cannot learn.
Sure.
So the school feeding program that has been, you know, launched should be spread across the country because there's still more children in public schools across Nigeria than in private schools. They're hungry, they will not learn. They sit on the floor, it's uncomfortable. It's very hot. Sometimes it's really cold or the rain has come in.
Sure.
And, you know, I've gone around Nigeria, to be fair, and looked at, when I was doing my research in public schools. And it is appalling, the state of our schools. The government is
and
interventions.
This is infrastructure you're talking
yes,
about.
so I'm talking about infrastructure, but that has an impact on learning.
Of course. Yes.
So I'm hot and bothered. I'm not listening to what the teacher's saying. And if you look at it regionally, in basic education, you're supposed to begin to teach the children from their local regional languages in the Nigerian curriculum. Okay, so take someone like me, who is everywhere, Nigerian, posted maybe to Enugu State, to a rural area. How am I supposed to communicate to those children in Igbo? I can't teach them. Meaning the system is setting
everyone up for failure.
Yes.
The teachers
it's set
are
up
set
to
up
be
for failure.
biased.
The students are set up for failure.
It's set up for political interference because, well, you know, I need to appoint my sister because my sister also speaks Hausa anyway, or my brother who speaks Igbo, and you don't focus on getting skilled practitioners. So that's corruption.
So one of the things that that's been happening now the last couple of weeks that I've been following is sort of this outcry about the SDG Goal 4 and the fact that Sub-Saharan Africa isn't going to meet it. And that is the quality education for all, which obviously is some of the conversations you're having. One of the things, though, that globally people keep on talking about is funding and funding and funding. And I guess a lot of international international organizations have reduced their funding to Sub-Saharan Africa, especially on early education. But when you're talking, some of the things I'm hearing from you is even more of reforming, because part of probably why people have stopped funding is because they're not seeing the reforms in the system.
Absolutely.
And they believe in data, so we also need to believe in data. So when you start to, I mean, as someone that's working in the primary space, and I want us to, in a way, I feel like it's so overwhelming, we need to almost focus on one space. When you look at the primary education, what are some of the steps that need to start to happen around reform, and then also accessing the right funding to make sure that if 2030 doesn't happen, what is our next plan?
2030 is not happening. It's not a matter of if it's not going to happen. We cannot get there. It's not. So what we do need to do is to channel some of that funding into proper teacher training, proper professional development. Let's take the NCE colleges, for example. Wouldn't it be wonderful for the curriculum of the NCE to be reviewed? to say that these are the minimum standards for numeracy, literacy, problem solving, and digital competency, so that the graduates of that at that level can actually teach these things. Graduate employability in this country, we all know what it is. Sometimes you interview graduates and you wonder, how did this person write the exam?
Sure.
Because we can't employ them. I work in a private school, and honestly, in the last few weeks, we have interviewed about 120 people and employed 3. Literally. Because half the time, the grammatical structure, okay, for us, knowledge of the curriculum is important, how you will use data and assessments, and they have no clue. And it's not their fault. They have not been taught.
Where can they go to learn that?
Unfortunately, for people like us, we go abroad. And we pay lots of money to go abroad. So the international organizations are now saying, look, we're bringing this funding here. Get your skilled practitioners to implement appropriate training and development, so that over the next few years, there will be a measurable impact on students' attainment.
Okay, so I don't want us to lose this. So when you look at that training, so this training attainment, is it a state responsibility or a federal responsibility? Who needs to take the mantle of that training, of this teacher training?
I think down to local government level, honestly, because the federal government can issue the directive. All teachers should be trained, things like that, but who's going to monitor? Who's going to check to make sure that level of training or upgrade is happening? We don't know. Because the federal, that's what, I believe that's what governance or government structures are set up to address. Local government, state, and federal. The local government can police the implementation of this training to make it effective. Again, the training has to be almost like regionalized.
We're gonna ask you to hold that thought when we come back. We're gonna go through the levels of training that's needed. Thank you, and we're gonna go on a short break. When we come back, we're gonna continue. Welcome back. We're still in studio with the head of primary at Children's International, Joy Issa, talking about the state of education in Nigeria, the challenges, especially around teacher training, because you kind of can't have any change if the people that are actually in the classroom every day with the kids don't have the right training. Where did we lose the plot on teacher training? How did this get out of hand? Because now there are teachers around the country, it doesn't matter where they are, where they're actually barely in the classroom 80% of the time, especially at public schools, because they have to go out there and find other ways of making a living because their salaries are not being paid. Yes, the side hustle life. And the time that they are in the classroom, part of teaching is you constantly have to be also developing yourself and engaging. So tell us, where did we and when? I mean, how long? I mean, how far back has this problem began?
Let me give you a very simple example. So I served in 1995, and I remember my service year. I served up north in Miola, and I remember after service year, I thought I will never teach again. Yes. Because my first degree is in French and linguistics, and I had to teach French to about 600 junior school students. The smallest class size was 97 children, and the next was about 130 in one room. They barely understood my English, and I had to teach them French. It was a waste of time, honestly.
So just when you say that, what's recommended?
When you say teacher-children ratio, it's one, depending on the age group, 1 to 20. If you go down to early years, you're looking at 1 to 7.
Oh, wow.
In early years. That's why you should have 3 adults in a room of 20 at least. Then when you come up, you can go up to 1 to 30, 35.
But
once you get to 1 to 97 effectiveness.
And it's not unusual. Because I actually read about a school in Sokoto, same thing. 10 teachers to almost 2,000 students.
Absolutely.
10 teachers in the whole school.
Thankfully, immediately after you service in 95, I got into a private school in Kaduna, then a British school. And I thought, okay, this is what teaching should be like. And it was fresh. Imagine if that prior experience was my only experience. I would not be a teacher today.
And you had continued.
And I've been doing this, since 95. That's 24 years or so? So imagine the young graduate now who studied maths engineering, maths education, English education, literature, whatever, goes into a classroom and has to teach 97 or 130 children, leaves the classroom and says, you know what, I'm going to look for a job in a bank because I cannot deal. I was not trained to deal with this number of children.
No, of course not.
So how, again, infrastructure, that's why I keep saying we cannot, separate infrastructure from teacher training. We have to address both. Even though they seem to be like parallel lines, there is a heavy impact of both. So teacher training, even if you go down to a degree in education, very different from an NCE. But if you look at the minimum requirement for a primary school teacher in this country, it's an NCE. How is the NCE holder equipped to teach digital competency, to teach, problem solving and all? Those skills are not embedded in that NCE curriculum. So going back to what I said earlier, the curriculum for teacher training needs revision, not just the curriculum for the children. And that, I have not, in all my years of searching, I've not seen anywhere where it has been revised since, like I popularly say, since 1914.
Wow.
When I do teacher training, I'm like, since the 1900s, we haven't revised our teacher training. So we're in the 21st century, but our teachers are educated in the 20th century manner. So how are these 20th century trained teachers supposed to deliver a 21st century curriculum?
That is another staggering fact you just dropped there, because the world has completely changed. I mean, I'm thinking of World War I footage.
Yes.
The world today looks nothing like that, and the training is still being used.
No one's updated the teacher training curriculum. It's the same. So expectations are the same. And you look at it and you think, that's why we have the private sector, again, coming up.
Okay.
We have, groups like, I know, you have these private schools, setting up training colleges, but you have, I know for a fact, in Lagos State, we have the Corona College of Education that has gotten a license from the government to run, to deliver the NCE. But how many teachers can afford that? They can't. So the side hustle is not real. It is essential for the teachers to survive. Without that side hustle, they won't survive. Why should they go to class when they go to class and their salaries will not be paid? How are they supposed to feed their own families? So who suffers? Our children.
Any bright spots?
I'm desperate for one at this point.
Any bright spots or any states that you see are working very hard and diligently to train teachers, to build more schools, to equip schools, to empower teachers?
There are pockets everywhere. Again, I'll go back to Kaduna State because I've seen the data on Kaduna State. There's a lot being put into teacher training. And there's some data, because it's all well and good to hear someone announce, oh, we're doing this, we're doing this. Where's the data supporting that you've actually done what you're saying you've done? So I would say Kaduna State, I've seen, a measured effort. Even in Lagos State as well, the effort to revamp, to resource the schools, technology or ICT labs, science labs and all, that has, you've seen, we have seen progressive effort. So yes, I would say so far, I've seen Lagos State has done a lot, Kaduna State has done a lot, but again, the people that are supposed to deliver this curriculum, we have to do something more long-term for the teachers. You can't expect to fix, or you can't expect, to fix a decaying system with a 2-month, quick fix training intervention. It's not going to happen. You need to overhaul the system, and it takes years. So again, I wish we could have, these sustainable goals sustained and implemented over time, because honestly, the situation is abysmal. That's why so many of us are sending our children abroad for training and begging them to come back to make a difference, because they go abroad and they think, wow, outstanding. His Excellency the Vice President mentioned, the young, entrepreneurs and young people making a difference, and he mentioned Chimamanda and all these literary giants, and I'm like, yeah, that's all well and good, but if you dig deep, all of them have overseas training in one way or the other. All of them.
And most of them have stayed
so
overseas.
A lot of them have stayed abroad. Some are coming back, but a lot of people, Farm City, I was reading up on it and I was like, yeah, I know some of these people. Check it. They went to some course, they did some master's program, they did something or the other, and they've come back, which is fantastic. How many of us have come back to establish proper teacher training so that our children can get good quality education? The private schools are now setting up their own teacher training so that at least, well, we're charging a premium,
But at least there's something.
But at least we're making sure the teachers are able to deliver.
Is it available to teachers in your school, or can anybody apply?
Anyone can apply. So their teachers, most private schools set up their own teacher training centers to equip their teachers. So maybe a few like myself who have self-funded their training overseas. A few schools are funding training overseas for their teachers. And then they come back and spread the love, as you will, and spread the knowledge and skills. But that is not enough. It's grossly inadequate compared to the population. So 10, 15, even if it's 1 million, how many young people in Nigeria? By 2050, 65% of this population will be youth.
Yeah, we have a very young population.
Yes.
Exactly.
But then the current figure being bandied around is that 13 million children out of school. But in reality, it's a lot more, because children who are in school,
Are
in
not
theory,
learning.
are not,
Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely. What you will say is at least they're being brought up or taught, they're being exposed to a certain amount of knowledge and a certain amount of skills. So that's better than nothing.
Sure.
Because the out-of-school children are more exposed to abuse and trafficking and things like that. But the children who are in schools are, within these controlled environments. Unfortunately, the way our school system is set up, children are not taught to think. Just get this information, pour it out in an
Regurgitate
exam,
it, yeah.
and you're good.
You're actually penalized if you attempt independent thought.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
you are.
I was one of those who didn't do very well in the standards exams because I had an opinion.
I'm like that too.
Yeah.
I always want to say what I think, and then I don't want to know what you think.
No.
You write what the examiner said to you,
Exactly.
and that's it, and you don't have an opinion.
Well, that's another issue. Can we address that? That's a deeply entrenched cultural issue.
Yeah.
Children should be seen and not heard. We don't
Exactly.
want your opinion. How dare you?
Have an opinion.
Offer one. Exactly. So what can be done to change that? Because it's stifling.
And that starts at the home. What type of things can we do at the home to start that?
I'm so glad you mentioned that because, again, if I go back to the Finnish system, the system is set up so that one parent stays at home, especially in the early years, primary years development of children. And then, the other one can go out to work and all, so that education happens at home as well. The research shows the more educated a mother is, the more educated the children will become.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much.
you
We're going to
so
have to
much,
have
Mrs.
you
Issa.
back.
That
This has
was
been
okay.
so insightful.
Illuminating.
And also just everyone's role in this ecosystem.
It makes a big, everyone needs to, everyone has a part to play. The parents, the teachers, the government and all, and we all need to do what, we need to contribute
Yes.
to the development of our children and our nation. So nation building is not this big theoretical, thing
You're
that
so
the
passionate.
government.
We have to have
Honestly,
you
I'm just
back.
like,
Thank you so much.
thank you for having me.
Thank you. That was Joy Issa of the Children's International School.